Please, just let me get my coat. I'm begging you, it's below freezing out there." The plea was a raw, desperate thing, torn from Ilara's throat, but it dissolved uselessly in the cathedral high ceilings of the grand ballroom. It was a cavern of cruelty tonight, the air, thick with the scent of expensive champagne, and even more expensive malice, seemed to swallow her voice whole. Ilara stood, a solitary, trembling figure in a borrowed dress that felt like a flimsy, flammable shroud. The fabric, once a rich, elegant navy, was now stained at the hem with something sticky and dark, a testament to the latest act of casual humiliation. Her eyes, usually a soft, hopeful gray, were wide and burning with unshed tears. A sneering laugh cut through the quiet, a sharp, ugly sound that drew the attention of the few remaining, exquisitely dressed vultures. It came from Victor, her ex-fiancé, a man whose tailored suit only made his soul look dirtier. He was flanked by a woman, all glittering teeth and diamond-encrusted apathy, who watched the spectacle with bored amusement. "Your coat, Ilara? You mean the cheap rag you wore in here? You don't need it," Victor scoffed, his voice carrying just enough to sting. He took a predatory step closer, forcing her to flinch back into the cold marble wall. "You didn't pay your tab, not the one you ran up at the bar, though God knows how you afforded the taxi here, but the one you owe me for letting you be seen tonight, for letting you breathe the same air as the people here. We're settling your debt right here." Debt, the crushing weight of it was why she was here. Not for the luxury, not for the illusion of belonging, but because her sister's life depended on the favor Victor promised to secure tonight. A small, desperate favor, a contact signature on a medical waiver. Victor had promised it would be an easy transaction. "Just come to the gala, Ilara, look pretty, don't embarrass me." He knew how much she needed it. He knew the life-draining cost of that waiver. But now, with the night nearing its end, and the promise of that signature dissolved into venom, he was demanding payment of a different kind. "What's the matter, Victor? Is the stray refusing to play fetch?" The woman, Serafina, drawled, taking a sip of her drink. Her eyes raked over Ilara's borrowed dress, lingered on the small stain, and dismissed her with a single contemptuous blink. Ilara swallowed the lump in her throat, the taste of ashes and fear. "I have nothing left to give you, Victor. The money, it's for my sister's medicine, you know that. Just let me go." "Nothing?" Victor's smile widened, cold and utterly devoid of humanity. He reached out, his fingers brushing the strap of her dress, and Ilara recoiled as if burned. "Oh, I think you do. You walked in here with a name, a reputation, however pathetic, and I think I'll take that as payment. Maybe you can entertain my associates outside, show them a little gratitude for the free champagne." The implication hung in the air, sickening, vile, and completely unprotected. The few stragglers who noticed merely averted their eyes, embarrassed not by the crime, but by the spectacle of poor taste. Humiliation cascaded over Ilara, a tidal wave of hot shame that threatened to drown her. This wasn't just about a coat or a dress. This was about stripping her of the last shred of her dignity, the last bit of control she had over her own body and her desperate situation. She closed her eyes, a silent prayer escaping her lips. "Someone, anyone, please." She saw a flash of her sister's face, pale and sweet, hooked up to the blinking machines in the sterile hospital room. That memory, that burden of love, was the only thing that kept her spine straight. She wouldn't collapse, not yet. "I won't go with anyone," Ilara whispered, forcing her voice to be steady. She looked Victor directly in the eye, the fear momentarily eclipsed by pure, crystalline defiance. "I came for the waiver, and you lied. You used my sister's illness to lure me here. You are a truly despicable man, Victor, and I would rather freeze on the street than take another breath of air near you." The silence that followed was heavy, a prelude to violence. Victor's face darkened, his control snapping. He didn't like being challenged, especially not by the stray he had decided to keep as a pet. He raised his hand, not to strike, but to grab, to drag her, to assert his control in the most public, brutal way. Ilara braced herself, her hands instinctively coming up, ready to fight not for her life, but for the right to leave this gilded cage with the last tattered remnants of her self-respect. The touch, when it came, was not Victor's. A hand, heavy and impeccably gloved, closed around Victor's wrist with the silent, inescapable force of a steel trap. Victor gasped, his face draining of color, not from pain, but from sheer terror. A figure emerged from the shadows near the entrance, a man who hadn't been there a second ago, a man who seemed to have materialized from the very darkness of the room. Silas the Shadow Volkov. He was a whisper in polite society, a chilling certainty in the underworld. Tonight, he was an immovable presence. His suit was black, tailored with lethal precision, and his eyes, when they met Victor's, were cold, bottomless pools of judgment. They weren't angry, they were simply devoid of mercy. The eyes of a judge who has already passed the sentence. He didn't move much, didn't need to. His power radiated outwards, an oppressive, suffocating atmosphere that instantly silenced the entire room. Serafina froze, her champagne glass halfway to her lips, her artificial poise shattering. Victor was trembling so violently that the expensive watch on his wrist rattled. Silas Volkov spoke. His voice was a low, resonant baritone, quiet enough to be intimate, yet carrying enough absolute authority to feel like a seismic shock. He addressed Victor, but his eyes never left Ilara, sweeping over her pale face, her trembling shoulders, the stain on her dress. His gaze was analytical, assessing the damage, the humiliation. Let go. It wasn't a request. It was an order, an execution. Victor yanked his hand back as if he'd touched fire, stumbling away from Ilara, rubbing his wrist with frantic, pointless energy. Silas finally turned his full attention to Victor, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I heard the end of that conversation, Victor, the little matter of the debt, the humiliation, the threat. Victor stammered, scrambling to find his tongue. Mr. Volkov, sir, it's just a misunderstanding, a private disagreement. She's my date. She's causing a scene. I was just trying to. Silas cut him off with a single, dismissive flick of his hand. It was a gesture that spoke volumes. I know exactly who and what you are, and your lies are pathetic. He then looked at Ilara again. This time, his dark eyes lingered on the raw courage that had momentarily flashed in her face when she defied Victor. He saw the genuine fear, the exhaustion, and beneath it all, the fierce, selfless love for her sister that was her driving force. He saw the sacrifice she was willing to make, and the brutal reality of the betrayal she had just suffered. He took a slow, deliberate step toward her, and the distance felt immense, an impossible bridge between two worlds. He stopped directly in front of her. The contrast was stark, her fragile, trembling body next to his monolithic, unyielding power. He reached out, not to touch her, but to gently move a single stray lock of brown hair that had fallen across her cheek, tucking it behind her ear with a surprising, almost tender care. His touch was brief, yet electrifying. Then, his eyes, colder and darker than midnight, lifted back to Victor. The next words he spoke were not directed at Ilara, but they were about her. They were a declaration, a claim that echoed off the marble walls and settled over the room like a heavy golden shroud. No one touches what's mine. The statement was quiet, utterly calm, and completely terrifying. Mine. The word wrapped around Ilara like an invisible, possessive coil. She hadn't been introduced to him, hadn't spoken a single word to him, yet he had just claimed her in front of the city's elite. Victor's face was the color of old parchment. He knew the cost of crossing Silas Volkov. He knew the absolute finality of that claim. I'm Mr. Volkov. I had no idea she was known to you. My mistake. My grave mistake. It is, Silas agreed, his voice a low hum of danger. And since you are so concerned with debts, let's settle yours. You will sign the waiver for the young woman's sister, now. And then you will disappear from this establishment, from this city, and from her life, permanently. If I ever hear your name breathed in the same sentence as hers again, you will find that a debt to me is not something you can survive. He didn't need to yell. The pure, unadulterated ruthlessness of his threat was chilling. Victor simply nodded, frantically pulling a pen and a crumpled piece of paper from his inside pocket, his hand shaking so badly he could barely scratch his signature onto the form. He thrust it out, eyes wide with desperate obedience. Silas took the paper and, without even looking at it, handed it to Ilara. The waiver, he said, his voice softer now, meant only for her. Go on, look at it. Ilara's hands were shaking so hard she nearly dropped the paper. She stared at the bold, spidery signature, the one thing she had sacrificed everything for tonight. The signature that meant life for her sister. A sob of pure relief, of sheer, exhausted gratitude, finally tore its way out of her chest. Silas then looked at Victor one last time, his lip curling into a barely perceptible expression of profound contempt. Now, leave. Victor and Serafina didn't wait for a second invitation. They scurried away, a pathetic echo of the arrogance they'd displayed minutes before, melting into the shadows and out the main doors. The room was silent. Every remaining eye was glued to Ilara and Silas. She was the one he had saved, the one he had claimed. Silas turned, taking a step toward the doors, and then stopped, glancing back at her. He saw her still standing there, clutching the signed waiver, utterly shell-shocked. He saw the cold still radiating from the marble, the trembling of her arms. He stripped off the heavy, finely spun black coat he wore, a masterpiece of Italian tailoring, and placed it gently over her shoulders. The warmth was immediate, enveloping. The scent, a deep, clean aroma of leather, fine cologne, and something distinctly masculine and dangerous, was intoxicating. "You won't freeze," he murmured, his gaze holding hers. "Now come, the night is over. If you've ever wished someone strong would step in when no one else would, when you felt utterly alone, completely exposed and humiliated, make sure you hit that like button right now. Let this channel know you believe in the kind of fierce, protective love that only rises from the deepest darkness." Ilara followed. She had no choice. She was walking on autopilot, the sheer emotional whiplash of the last 10 minutes having short-circuited her ability to reason. One moment she was being threatened with ruin. The next, she was wrapped in the coat of the most feared man in the city, her sister's life saved. They left the grand ballroom, the silence following them like a tangible thing. Outside, the night air was sharp and unforgiving. A sleek black sedan, a quiet tank, sat idling at the curb, its doors opened by a driver with eyes that saw everything and betrayed nothing. Silas gestured to the back seat. "Get in." I can't," Ilara finally managed, her voice hoarse and shaky. She gripped the waiver in one hand and the lapels of his massive coat with the other. "Mr. Volkov, I don't know who you are, but I need to go to the hospital, and I need to give you your coat back." He paused, holding the passenger door open. He looked less like a man of flesh and blood, and more like a statue carved from shadow and obsidian. "You know who I am," he countered, his voice steady. "You know that man, Victor, knew my name and feared it. That is enough for tonight, and the coat stays." He saw the confusion, the sudden building terror returning to her eyes. The terror of owing a debt to a man far more dangerous than Victor. "Don't look like that, Krezivaya," he said, the Russian endearment soft and unexpected, catching her off guard. "I'm not Victor. I don't deal in petty humiliations or physical threats to a woman's dignity. If I want something, I simply take it, and tonight, I've taken the right to keep you safe. Now tell the driver where your hospital is." The finality in his tone brooked no argument. Ilara stumbled into the vast, leather-scented interior of the car. The driver, a muscular man with a calm, watchful face, closed the door with a quiet thunk that felt like the ceiling of a vault. She gave the address, her mind racing. "Why? Why me? Why did you help me?" she asked, the moment the car pulled silently away from the curb. Her voice was stronger now, tinged with a desperate need for clarity. Silas was sitting beside her, occupying the space with effortless, contained power. He leaned back, his profile sharp against the passing city lights. "Because," he said simply, his eyes scanning the road behind them, always vigilant, "I dislike men who prey on the weak, especially those who use love or necessity as a weapon. Victor's type," he paused, a slight, almost imperceptible hardening of his jaw, "deserves to be broken. I enjoyed breaking him." That's not the whole truth, Ilara thought. There had been something else in his eyes when he looked at her. "But you also claimed me," she pressed, the word mine still ringing in her ears, possessive and terrifying. "You told him, 'No one touches what's mine. I am not yours. I don't belong to anyone.'" He turned his head slowly, and their eyes met in the subdued light of the cabin. She could see the complexity in his gaze now, the cold ruthlessness, yes, but also a flicker of something raw, something that mirrored the exhaustion and sacrifice she felt. "Everything and everyone has a price, Ilara. You, however, are a rare commodity tonight," he said, the words heavy and considered. "You were alone. You were terrified. You were at your breaking point. But when that animal raised his hand, you didn't cower. You stood tall. You defied him. You risked ruin for the sake of your sister, a vulnerability he exploited. That defiance, that unbroken spirit, that is a treasure. And it is something I find I want to protect. He reached out and gently took the hand that held the waiver. He didn't try to take the paper, he simply closed his larger, warmer hand around hers. A sudden surge of heat and connection. "You're right," he admitted, his voice dropping to an intimate, husky register. "You do not belong to me, but I saw your pain. I saw your humiliation laid bare for those vultures to pick apart, and I chose to step in. That choice, Kresivaya, is a contract. You are now tied to me, not by my will, but by my action. My word is absolute, and my protection is fierce." He squeezed her hand once, a gesture of unexpected strength and reassurance. "So for tonight, you are under my protection, and under my protection, no one touches you. You are mine to defend." Ilara felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crack. All her life, she had fought alone. Her parents abandoned her. Her sister was her sole responsibility. She worked 3 jobs, lived on scraps, faced down loan sharks, and navigated the bureaucratic nightmare of her sister's rare illness, all on her own. The constant gnawing stress had become her normal. She had learned to expect betrayal, not benevolence. "My sister," she whispered, her voice thick. "She's all I have left. This waiver, it means everything." "It's done," Silas confirmed, releasing her hand to tap the driver on the shoulder. "When we arrive at the hospital, you will walk in with the waiver. You will secure her treatment, and I will wait. You'll wait, until you are safe, until you can breathe without looking over your shoulder," he said, his gaze intense. "I don't leave things unfinished, Ilara, and I don't abandon what I have decided to claim." The car pulled up to the hospital entrance. The driver was out instantly, opening her door. Ilara looked at Silas, his face etched in the soft interior lighting, a mixture of danger and something akin to a quiet, unwavering devotion. She felt a magnetic pull toward this dark, complicated man who had rescued her from the brink. It was a terrifying, forbidden attraction, the kind that promised both fire and ruin. "I have nothing to give you in return," she whispered, stepping out of the car, the heavy coat still wrapped around her like a shield. "I can't pay you." He smiled then, a small, genuine curve of his lips that transformed his face, making him look devastatingly, alarmingly human. "Then don't," Silas replied, leaning forward just enough that his voice was a warm, intimate brush against her ear. "Just live. Just let me watch you stand tall again. The debt is settled, Ilara. Now go get your sister better. I'll be here when you return." Ilara didn't hesitate. Clutching the waiver, she rushed into the hospital, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm of relief and hope. An hour later, Ilara walked back out, the night air no longer bitter. The waiver was submitted, the paperwork complete, and the doctor had confirmed that her sister's specialized treatment would begin tomorrow. The weight that had crushed her spirit for months was finally gone. She saw the black sedan immediately. It was still there, a silent sentinel in the dark. Silas Volkov was leaning against the passenger door, his arms crossed over his chest, a picture of cold, dangerous patience. He wasn't on his phone, he wasn't looking at anyone, he was simply waiting for her. She stopped in front of him, slipping his coat from her shoulders. She held it out, the soft, expensive fabric feeling alien in her hands. "Thank you," she said, her voice clear and steady now, her fear replaced by a strange, overwhelming mix of gratitude and burgeoning desire. "I don't know how to repay you, but I will, I promise." He took the coat, but he didn't put it on. Instead, he simply draped it over his arm, his dark eyes fixed on her face. "You're safe," he observed, ignoring her offer of repayment. It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. "Yes, you saved her life, Mr. Volkov, and you saved me." "Silas," he corrected gently. "Silas." She breathed his name, and it felt like a silent vow. He stepped closer, closing the last few inches between them. She was no longer trembling with fear, but with a sudden, thrilling anticipation. He smelled clean, dangerous, and intoxicating. "You were sitting alone at that gala, Ilara, humiliated. Desperate," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Now you stand here whole, brave, and you owe no one anything, except perhaps a debt of curiosity. Why did I stay?" He didn't wait for her to answer. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing away a lingering stray tear that she hadn't realized she'd cried. His touch was warm, powerful, and utterly proprietary. "The moment that pig Victor raised his voice to you, You ceased to be a struggling woman in a borrowed dress, Silas whispered, his lips impossibly close to her ear. His breath was warm against her skin, sending shivers down her spine. You became a fixation, a necessary protection, a dangerous distraction. You showed me a fire I didn't think existed in this cold city. He leaned back slightly, his eyes holding hers in a dark, silent promise. The night was cold, but the air around them was suddenly hot, charged with an intensity that promised a world of danger and devotion. From this moment, no one touches you. You're mine.